They thought humiliating her publicly would break her, but instead, it awakened something unstoppable. Before you dive in, hit subscribe so you never miss another jaw-dropping story of revenge, courage, and transformation. When 16-year-old Arya Dalton walked into Crestwood High that morning, she had no idea her entire life was about to split into a before and after, because up until that moment her strategy for surviving the cruel ecosystem of high school was simple: keep her head down, get straight A's, avoid the queen bees who prowled the halls like self-appointed goddesses of judgment, and count the days until graduation freed her. But fate had a different plan, one she never saw coming, and it all ignited during an ordinary Tuesday assembly when three notorious bullies, Madison Hale, Bianca Cross, and Tiffany Rhodes, decided they needed a new form of entertainment, and Arya, sitting quietly in the second row, became their target. The rumor had somehow spread that Arya, the introverted scholarship girl who worked 3 evening jobs and wore the same 2 hoodies all winter, had dared to reject the flirtations of Jordan Maddox, the football captain and the most popular boy on campus, though in truth she had simply told him during chemistry that she wasn't interested, and Jordan, embarrassed by rejection from the one girl considered invisible, had told Madison she had attitude, which to Madison meant unforgivable disrespect. So as the teachers prepared the projector for the assembly, Madison strutted down the aisle with Bianca and Tiffany flanking her like gleaming shadows, and before Arya could shift away or even stand, Madison's manicured hand cracked across Arya's cheek, echoing painfully through the gymnasium packed with 200 students who gasped in collective shock, their whispers rising like a tidal wave. And for the first time in Arya's quiet existence, everyone was watching her. But instead of crying or running, Arya lifted her head, eyes burning not with tears but with a strange, steady fire, because something in her snapped, not in a chaotic way, but in a fierce, awakening way, like a sleeping lion opening its eyes, and she rose to her feet slowly, so calmly that even Madison blinked in confusion, and Arya said in a voice so clear it silenced the entire gym, "Thank you," which made the bullies laugh until she continued, "because now everyone sees you exactly as you are." And a ripple passed through the crowd as students recorded everything, their cameras capturing not Arya's humiliation but Madison's stunned expression, and with sudden boldness Arya walked to the front of the stage, grabbed the microphone, and addressed the entire school despite the teachers still frozen in shock, saying, "For years, people like them have hurt people like me. Today, I'm done letting it happen," and her words hit like lightning because they weren't angry. They were powerful, raw, honest, and students who had been bullied themselves felt the truth in her voice. But Arya wasn't finished. She pulled something from her backpack, printed screenshots, records, messages, because unknown to anyone she had been documenting every act of bullying she had witnessed, not just against her but against dozens of other students, and she had planned to send it anonymously to the district officer someday, but now she felt brave enough to do it here, openly, in front of everyone, and she held up the evidence for the entire gym to see, including Madison bragging about shoving a freshman into a locker, Bianca threatening a girl online, Tiffany stealing from a special needs student's fundraiser, and as the screens flipped through the projector she'd connected without permission, the crowd erupted, not in chaos but in outrage against the bullies. Not her, and teachers finally snapped into action, pulling Madison's group aside as their faces flamed red, yet Arya kept speaking, telling her story, telling every student their pain mattered and they deserved safety. And by the time she stepped down from the stage, she wasn't invisible anymore but a storm of inspiration, and while Madison shouted protests that Arya had ruined her life, the principal announced an immediate investigation, something no student had ever been bold enough to demand publicly, and the gym filled with cheers for Arya, whose heartbeat thundered with a mix of terror and exhilaration. But the story didn't end there because backlash came swiftly. Anonymous threats slipped into her locker, cruel notes taped to her desk, and Jordan himself cornered her after school, blaming her for Madison's suspension. But instead of shrinking, Arya looked him in the eye and said, "I didn't ruin anything." The truth did, and turned away, and students who once ignored her now walked beside her, some thanking her for giving them courage, others asking for help reporting their own experiences, and Arya realized she had started something bigger than revenge. She had sparked a movement, yet the bullies weren't done. 2 weeks later, during a school election assembly, Madison returned from suspension furious and vengeful, plotting to humiliate Arya by hacking the school's LED board to display edited photos mocking her. But Arya, anticipating retaliation, had already worked with the new student anti-bullying committee she formed to create a powerful video message about confronting cruelty with courage. And when Madison triggered her sabotage, expecting to see Arya's humiliation appear above the stage, the screen instead lit up with the committee's video, A montage of real students telling their silent stories of suffering and strength, ending with the message, "We rise together," and the gym erupted not with laughter but with thunderous applause, drowning Madison's scream of frustration, and principal authorities escorted Madison out again as she shrieked accusations at Arya, but no one listened this time. They were too focused on the movement growing before their eyes, because Arya had become the face of something unstoppable. Yet even as she gained admiration, she stayed humble, working after school, helping younger students, meeting with administrators to build safer policies, and eventually the district recognized her efforts, inviting her to speak at regional conferences. But the greatest twist came months later during the school talent showcase, when Arya, encouraged by newfound friends, sang publicly for the first time, her voice silencing the auditorium in awe, and Jordan, who once mocked her, sat in the front row looking stunned, whispering to friends that rejecting her had been the stupidest mistake of his life. Though Arya barely noticed, her eyes were on someone else, Jace, the quiet graphic design student who had helped her create the anti-bullying logos and who admired her long before she ever stood up to Madison. And after her performance, he shyly handed her a notebook filled with sketches he'd drawn of her standing strong on that first day, and she felt something warm bloom in her chest. Realizing she no longer feared being seen, she embraced it, because she had built herself from hurt to hero, and her journey, once forced into chaos by bullies' cruelty, had transformed her not into someone hardened but someone brave, someone who turned pain into power. And by the end of the school year, Crestwood High was nothing like the place it had been. New reporting systems, supportive staff, empowered students, and Arya, now celebrated as a local youth advocate, prepared to step onto even bigger stages, her scars not erased but shining as proof of survival. And Madison, facing suspension after suspension, finally apologized, not because she wanted to, but because she saw Arya's influence everywhere and could no longer pretend she was untouchable. And Arya forgave her, not for Madison's sake but for her own peace, proving that the girl once slapped before 200 students had grown into someone unshakable. She had turned the most humiliating moment of her life into a catalyst that reshaped an entire school, inspired hundreds, and ignited a future far brighter than any bully ever imagined. And as she walked across the graduation stage months later, the applause thundering like a rising storm, Arya lifted her chin, smiling with a strength she never knew she had, knowing her story wasn't ending, it was just beginning, fueled by courage, shaped by resilience, and defined forever by the moment she chose not fear, but power.